This is a section taken through the wall of the colon, or large intestine. The section has been stained with hematoxylin and eosin. Here are the layers of the muscularis externa, an inner, circular, orientated layer and an outer, longitudinal layer. This darker stained region, adjacent to the lumen of the colon, is called the mucosa, which appears very folded. And so the collagenous connective tissue region here, in the core of these folds, is the submucosa. At this early stage of your histology learning, you don't need to worry about the details of the structure of the colon, as I will deal with that in my lectures on the gastrointestinal tract in the human organs course. Look at the mucosa, which is epithelium, supported by connective tissue called the lamina propria, and separated from the submucosa by a very thin, so difficult to resolve here, pale stained layer of smooth muscle, the muscularis mucosa. The mucosa is thick because the epithelium has invaginated into the lamina propria to form simple straight tubular glands. Depending on the plane of the section through this part of the large intestine, you'll see the straight tubular glands cut in many orientations. I'm going to describe these glands viewing this region here in higher magnification, and then this region here in higher magnification, because the glands have been sectioned nicely longitudinally here and transversely here. The simple tubular glands extend down the full thickness of the lamina propria of the mucosa. Look here, and you can just see 2 or 3 layers of smooth muscle making up the muscularis mucosa I mentioned earlier. And then this is the collagenous submucosa. Each gland empties individually onto the surface directly without intervening ducts. You can see secretion products in the lumen. These glands have several acceptable names: mucosal glands, based on their location, crypts of Lieberkühn as a specific proper name, and glands of the colon because they are the only glands of that organ, ignoring individual goblet cells. These glands of the colon have 2 fundamental functions. First, they're secretory. Their abundant goblet cells produce mucus. You'll have no problem identifying these large, pale cells, and in their cytoplasm is the secretion product, which you may have already noticed has a similar staining to the secretion products in the lumen I pointed out a moment ago. The glands are also cytogenic. The stem cells for the epithelium that lines the intestines are located down in the glands. Here, they divide continually with a generation time of about 1 day. The newly formed cells get pushed up the glands and onto the surface. Within a few days they die, they're sloughed off and are replaced. Presumably, sequestering the stem cells deep down in the glands protects them from the rather hostile environment of the lumen of the gastrointestinal tract. Goblet cells seem to dominate the epithelium of the crypts, but there are other non-mucus secreting cells of the epithelium, particularly lining the lumen of the colon. Their main function is to absorb water. The epithelium is simple columnar. The nuclei are close to the base of the cell. The free surface of the glandular epithelium is a small tubular lumen which extends to the surface. Although it doesn't appear to be the case, if you compared the number of goblet cells to the number of nuclei in the epithelium, you'd conclude that most of the cells are absorptive enterocytes. A basal lamina, which you cannot see, surrounds each gland and separates its epithelial cells from the surrounding connective tissue or lamina propria. An elongated structure, such as a gland, will appear quite differently when cut in different orientations. It's always important to find areas with the simplest plane of section for your study. In this case, I had looked for a region that has been sectioned perpendicular to the surface, so that the tubular glands are shown longitudinally, as you can clearly see in this image. The longitudinal view will show you the length of the glands. They extend the full thickness of the lamina propria, that the glands are straight instead of coiled, and that the glands have no ducts. They had their opening onto the surface. Now in this image, the section is cut parallel to the surface of the lumen of the colon, and so the glands are cut transversely. At many other places in the section, the glands would have been cut obliquely to some degree or other. Here, you can just see that 2 or 3 layers of smooth muscle that makes up the muscularis mucosa, but this time cut transversely. And again, this is the collagenous submucosa. Transverse sections let you see that the glands are round in cross-section, have a small lumen, are surrounded by a loose cellular connective tissue, the lamina propria, and they're abundant